Good morning and welcome back to the weekly Midrash. The Midrash in Parshat Shemot Rabbah tells us Vayar b'sivlosam that Moshe Rabbeinu walked around the streets of Egypt and he saw the suffering, he saw the pain of the Bnei Israel. Mahu Vayar. What does it mean he saw it? Shahaya roeh b'sivlosam. He saw their suffering. Uboche, and he started to cry. Ve'omer, and he said Chaval li aleichem. Woe is to me on them. Mi yitain mos yalechem. Would it be that I should die in their place? I had hurt Moshe so much. Shein lecha malacha kashem lechas hatit vayanosin ktefav mesayel lechol echad v'echad mehen. He said there's no difficult labor like the labor of having to work with mortar and having to form bricks with your bare hands. And he would put his shoulder and he would give a shoulder to cry for each person to lean on in their anguish, in their time of sorrow. Then Rabbi Lazar ben Osher Rabbi Yossi Aglili adds, Ra'a masoi gadol al katan, masoi katan al gadol. He saw a young child carrying a burden that was fit for an older person, and he saw an older person carrying a burden that was fit for a younger person. Masoi ish al isha, the thing that was customarily carried by a man, carried by a woman, and vice versa. Masoi isha al ish, masoi zakin al bachor, the burden of an old man on a young boy, masoi bachor al zakin, and the burden of a young child on an elderly person, and this caused him pain. The question on this version of the Midrash to Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, is why does this cause Moshe Rabbeinu pain? Vayar b'sivlosam, Moshe says enough is enough. What should bother Moshe? What should trouble him? What should trouble Moshe should be infanticide, murder, beatings, abuses, human rights, abuses, slavery in general. But Moshe is very worried that the job they're doing is not fit for them. That the person who has an MBA, a person who went to law school, is now moonlighting as a paralegal, a barista, and this troubles Moshe Rabbeinu more than the large issues, more than the large-scale problems. So why is Moshe Rabbeinu worried about this? Why does it disturb Moshe to see that people are performing the job that's incorrect for their skill set, or for their age, or for their gender? I think the answer is that of course Moshe was troubled by slavery. Of course the human rights abuses bothered Moshe. But what bothered Moshe more than anything in the world is the suffering to have to see someone feel that they're doing a job which is beneath them. Austin Murphy, an author at The Atlantic, wrote an article a number of years ago where he described the fall from grace that someone has to experience when they're forced to do a job that they feel is beneath their kavod, beneath their dignity, beneath their skill set or training. And that anguish is described via anecdote about a person who was driving a delivery truck. And once upon a time, this Amazon delivery truck driver was a very well-known cyclist who was invited by, a very well-known sportscaster who was invited by George W. Bush back in the summer of 2005 when this sportscaster was covering in the press the Tour de France. And back then, George Bush was looking for some good press because the Iraq war the war effort in Iraq was going sideways, and so the 43rd president needed some good recognition. So he invited along to ride the bike with him some of the press and some writers, so he can get some traction as the folksy, sort of likable president that he wanted to be imagined in the eyes of the media. And he remembers that he was invited, and years later, this very truck driver, who used to be an elite member of the sports press, was now driving his truck, delivering his Amazon deliveries, which is a job that is mechubad. But he was driving this truck, remembering fondly his days when he was once this elite member of the press. And on the radio, he listened in as the former president was eulogizing his father, George Herbert Walker Bush. And when he remembered that, it was heartbreaking, because he remembered the fall from grace, how once upon a time he was invited to ride side by side on a bike along the president, and now he was driving a truck, listening to the president on the news. Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness is that he's sensitive not just to the great and awesome atrocities of the time of Egypt, but also the subtle atrocities, the subtle pain that a person feels when they're not in the right state of mind, when they're not doing the right thing, when they feel they're acting in a way that is beneath their skill set and their training. The greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu is that he's sensitive to all sorts of tsaras, not just the massive tsaras, but also the lesser tsaras that on the human level that we each experience in our lives.